if you wanted to do public comments, you can do it now, or you can do it at the end. So that's you may do either. Sir.
Good evening. My name is Roger Nye. I live in Norton Shores. I'm a retired federal official. I'm also a member of Occupy Muskegon and of Don't Frack West Michigan. In the contacts we've had with officials in this area, we have been hearing repeatedly that the drilling of oil and gas wells is a matter out of your hands. The drilling of a couple of wells may seem like a small matter to you, but if those exploratory wells yield significant amounts of hydrocarbons, you may find yourselves surrounded by dozens or even hundreds of wells, each making massive demands on your local water resources, and each posing a significant pollution threat to your drinking water sources and other groundwater. Our answer is that this township board may not legally be able to prevent the drilling of oil and gas wells and the use of hydraulic fracturing techniques, also known as fracking, but you have the right and duty to protect the interests of your citizens. And to that end, there are many things that you can do. Have you advised your citizens to have baseline testing of their soil and water done before hydraulic fracturing begins? Have you encouraged them to check with their insurance companies as to whether they have any coverage against damage caused by fracking? Have you planned what to do if a drop in groundwater levels endangers the water supply of the village of Ravenna? Have you communicated with the county's Office of Emergency Preparedness to work out a plan of action in the event of some more serious emergency occurring? Have you done anything to equip your fire department with hazmat capability? Have you considered how to deal with the possibility of a wellhead accident that would emit dangerous amounts of toxic hydrogen sulfide gas? Do you have any early warning system that would alert citizens to shelter indoors and require schools to get their children off the playgrounds when toxic substances are released? Have you considered regulations to restrict the hours during which noisy drilling rigs can operate? Given that drilling rigs generate large amounts of truck traffic, have you considered what measures will be necessary to prevent heavy vehicles from tearing up your roads? Have you considered whether a drilling moratorium might be needed so that you have time to deal with these issues? This coming July 1st will mark the 150th anniversary of the day when General George G. Meade decided to make a stand against a superior Confederate force by digging in on a low ridge just outside the small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. General Meade did not ask permission of the Gettysburg town government or the town's leading citizens to confront Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. What happened next is history. Just as the Civil War had basically nothing to do with the affairs of the town of Gettysburg, so too the issue of fracking in Ravenna is not a local one. It is part of a much larger picture extending far beyond this township, the state of Michigan, and even the United States of America. It is a global issue. From Ireland to New Zealand, oil companies are seeking to use this extraction practice to keep alive a little longer an obsolescent technology that is putting huge volumes of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and making dangerous changes to the climate of the entire world. You can consider this as a sort of ultimatum then. We and others have tried to educate you on these subjects so you can't plead ignorance. And if you won't stand up to the oil and gas companies, you can be sure that those companies will walk all over you and your people. If your citizens suffer as a result, they should hold you fully accountable for what you have done and what you have failed to do. Our consciences are clear. We have warned you. At this point, we are still open to dialogue and to arranging a genuinely informative meeting with citizens without a repeat of the MDEQ's 3x5 cards and dog and pony show. However, given that drilling could begin any day, I think that the time for talking has just about run out and the time for action has begun. As the oil companies converge on this township, we will be rallying against them together with other individuals and groups. People in places far and wide are becoming aware of your township's role as ground zero for fracking in Muskegon County. We will be monitoring the oil companies' moves and considering what means of nonviolent political action we can effectively employ against them. Expect an interesting summer. We'll be around and we are ready to make some history. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Hey, can we possibly get that list of questions you have? I'd like to see it. I'd like to ask.
Questions I have?
Yeah, the ones you gave.
Do the whole thing.
Is that possible? Absolutely. Thanks for putting the time in. You're welcome. General Meade wasn't a very good general. He wasn't a very good Union general. General Meade. That's awesome. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Matt Crean, and I'm affiliated with Occupy Muskegon as well as the Muskegon Tea Party. And I generally, personally, have not gotten into environmental issues until fracking came about. And the more and more I read about it, and the more and more I study about it, the more worried I get about it. Horizontal fracking is much, much different than vertical fracking. And when you study it, and see what the goal here is, one typical deep horizontal well can replace up to 10 to 20 vertical wells. That's the motivation for the oil companies to drill horizontally. It's a lot cheaper. They don't care what they're doing, what it does to the environment. They care what it does to their pocketbook. That's their sole motivation to go horizontal versus vertical. That's where the danger comes in. Now, when you go down 20,000 feet rather than 2,000 feet, you increase a lot of the pressure deep within the Earth's surface. That's also dangerous because the increased pressure will blow up more toxic fluid through any type of pinhole that you get the deeper you go in the Earth's surface. If you go ahead and you're near the aquifer, and in this case you've got a protected wellhead area, the closer you get to that, it contaminates the water supply. Now, even though all of us live about 20 miles west of here, we have a regional concern for the whole area because our whole water supply is going to be affected. This could happen in Moreland Township, it could happen in Abelson Township, any township that has this. You're the ones that ended up with it, so that's why we're here tonight. That's the danger. It hurts the water supply here, it hurts it regionally, as well as Ottawa County, Nuevo County, and obviously Muskegon County. When you take a look at this and study it more and more and more, you realize that this is just not safe. And they're trying to pawn it off as something that is something that, well, they do it all the time. No, they don't do it all the time. The first horizontal fracking well constructed in Michigan was in 2010, just not even 3 years ago. It only operated for a few months and they shut it down because it wasn't producing like it should be. So we've only had one other one in Michigan. This is going to be under, there's one in Oceana County now. We're going to be under a dozen wells in Michigan, and you've got one of them right in your backyard. Now, one thing I find interesting the more I study this is that normally you have websites put up saying, you know, don't frack West Michigan, we're against fracking. And it just tells the general run-of-the-mill things you'd expect. But I found that, I believe I got this at the meeting you had at the fire barn. And hopefully you all have a copy of this, and if you'd like one, I'd be happy to leave this, you copy it tonight and pass it out to your township officials. This is what's really important. Some of these websites here, the World Health Organization, regarding endocrine disrupting chemicals, endocrinedisruption.com. That scares me because that's something that once you start damaging your basic human functions, you don't get them back. These are people that, when you take a look at these cancers that people got that lived up in the Ott-Story chemical area, Hooker chemical area, and White Lake, all these people have this high incidence of bladder cancer. Well, where did all that come from? It came from those chemical companies up there. And all that they were interested in at the time was jobs and money. They thought it was going to be really beneficial to the area. Here, it's going to be really beneficial to the oil company. And I don't think you're going to get that many jobs or money out of it locally. You're going to get the handful that come in here, but they're not going to be Ravenna area residents. They're all going to be trucked in here from Grand Rapids, or for that matter, even other states. So the more you study this, here's another one. Nurse who became deathly ill and oil companies refused to disclose proprietary ingredients to doctors. They don't want to tell you what's in the chemicals that they're using to blow up the Earth's surface 20,000 feet below, because if they did, you'd ride them out of town on a rail. So would any other municipality. They say, well, it's proprietary to us, we can't tell you. Now, if you're going to go out and use some dynamite to go blow up something in one of your fields, We all know what's in that. It's dynamite. It blows up what you need to blow up, and you get the stumps removed, whatever else you have to take out, and move on with your business. But the oil companies don't want to tell us what's in there. That should be dangerous. How can one oil company come along and say, well, we've got a proprietary package of chemicals here, and it's for our benefit to go ahead and blow up the earth 20,000 feet below, and the other oil company down the road says, well, yeah, we've got chemicals too, but they're different. Come on. We all know they're not different. We all know they're the same. There's no variations to this. Just as there's no variations to dynamite to speak of. It's got certain components to it. Use it for what you're going to use it for, and that's what they're doing here. But they had to go ahead and keep this quiet to the extent that they could, and that's why they're still trying to keep it quiet by not divulging it. I think that's near criminal. When you have people getting sick from this, and they don't want to divulge what's in it so the doctor can formulate a cure, that alone is, for that reason alone, I wouldn't even have to go any further to satisfy myself that this is a dangerous type of thing. But obviously some people that the oil company doesn't think so. They've done a marvelous job of lobbying the state behind the scenes for a number of years to get this passed, and now all of a sudden it winds up in our backyards. There's another website here that has an ongoing list of people that they're claiming fracking has harmed them, and there's 1,300 reports. Now, if there was maybe 13, maybe 100, you'd think, well, maybe they could be false. Maybe they got something else happened to them besides the fracking problem. No, 1,300, there can't be that many people claiming that they have something the matter with them. 1,300 people now have some kind of health symptoms that are negative that they didn't have before. So this is something that I really, really urge you to study this. I know that because of state law, there's not as much that you can do about it. But the more you study this in detail, you can keep an eye on that well, and if they don't comply with the permit process, the DEQ will come in and shut them down. So if something's in the wellhead, the permit process, and the permit says, for instance, when you're putting this well in, you have to have something 5 feet from a certain line. Somebody goes out there and measures it, it's 4.5 feet. DEQ needs a phone call, get that thing shut down. Any little thing that they deviate from, you do have the power to go ahead and shut it down. It's really, really important you take that seriously. I don't like them experimenting in Michigan. I don't like them experimenting with this anywhere, but this is too new to Michigan, and Michigan's geological infrastructure is not the same as other states. So they're using that as some kind of an excuse. We're different. We're a Great Lakes state. We've got water on 3 sides of us. We don't need to be experimented with, and it's up to, fortunately or unfortunately, guess whose backyard it's in, and I'm looking at 5 people that are responsible to see to it that this is done as safely as possible, if in fact it's even able to be done safely. So thank you for the opportunity.
No, thanks for the words. I appreciate it.
What was your last name, sir?
Crehan, C-R-E-H-A-N.
What's his first name?
Matt.
I got a comment.
Go ahead, Cameron.
Did you happen to check the perspective of Rosetta Oil?
I did. I can't say I know it. I had a perspective on my desk.
The copy that I gave you, that company is running on credit. And what they do is they don't use any of their own money. They can borrow money cheap, and they are exactly one disaster away from filing bankruptcy.
Yeah.
They've got $1.5 million of assets, and they're over $600 million in debt because they're not using their own money. They've got a lot of wells, but what they're doing is they're skimming the profits off these wells, and they're putting it in their pockets, and they're borrowing money to run their operation. And if you will find that all these wells over here are going to be outsourced. There's not going to be one job here. Their drilling is outsourced. Everything is outsourced. The only thing you might get is a restaurant. You know, somebody might need a restaurant. But I don't care if you look at that perspective that it is. That company is skimming. It's just like the housing. You remember when we talked about the housing, about how people borrowed money and they knew they couldn't afford it? Well, this is just a little different, except they borrow money with the idea that there won't be an accident. But if there is an accident, it's not their money. and they can walk away, and they can leave this township holding the bag. That's the way I read it.
And I don't disagree, Ken. I think, that the impact on this community, fiscally or monetarily is probably not that great. It probably isn't. I realize that, and on my side, I'm more concerned on the infrastructure. I really am. How's this going to impact our community? And we can impact upon that if we see issues with that. And I appreciate what you said, because really this is, from the board perspective, I think, I'm speaking for the whole board, but somebody has a different idea, thought, speak up please, but that we basically are going to allow this to go through the way it is right now. When they are starting drilling, there's nothing we're going to do to prevent that. We're not going to try to do a moratorium like one of the other townships in Kent County has attempted to do. I think it may end up in court again, maybe going the other way, but that's neither here nor there. So we're probably, unless something significant happens, and we are, no doubt about it, we are relying on the DEQ to be the policeman. And if Rick does what his job says and he has his managers and things do right, this will go okay. Does that mean bad things may not happen? I don't say it won't. I can't guarantee it. I can't guarantee they won't go under, Ken.
I understand that, Ken, but can I say another thing? Why take the chance? I mean, here you've got your community wells right near that well. If there was 100,001 chance that they would mess those wells up and walk away, would you want that? Would Swanson want that on his conscience?
I don't think anyone from Don Swanson to myself, to anyone in this board, to anyone in the community wants something bad to happen.
And I don't understand why, did he research this at all before he decided to do this?
He said he did, yeah.
Where?
I'm not sure.
As you guys know, you can find websites from both sides that'll say this is the best thing since sliced bread, or this is, I use the expression hair on fire, things are just, going south in a hurry, right? And so I think, we can probably, talk about it all day and still not come to an agreement as to whether it's safe or not.
Another thing is, I don't think the DEQ is a good watchdog. The thing that I seen at that meeting, you had the gal there from the oil company, okay, and she knew absolutely nothing. And then they had the fella that was supposed to be anti-fracking or whatever it is. But that third guy, the DEQ guy,
Rick, yeah.
He'd been to thousands of these. And you could tell just by the way that man talked, because I even tried to rattle him, and he couldn't be rattled. They are bought and paid for by those oil companies. I can see it.
We've had that discussion before. I'm not convinced of that, Ken, but I understand where your position is on that. I guess I just want to give the township board position here, which is basically, we're not going to go move against that ruling, but
is there any way you can?
No, I suppose we could try to do Kent County and have our lawyer file an injunction. They did that for another county.
Well, I see by the amount he charges you, he could probably do that for nothing, $13,000.
Good luck on that one.
No, but that's a different issue, Ken. But no, we don't plan to become involved unless we are forced to by something that occurs. That's the truth of it. That's where we're at.
In other words, there's no preventive. It's not going to be a preventive thing. It's just going to be just go, right?
Well, how do I be preventive?
By going, I guess, and seeing Swanson and say, hey, look now, look what you're bringing on this town. I mean, look at that meeting. That's not my fault. That meeting's not my fault, or any other meeting in this township, or these people being here. It's all Swanson's fault. He's the one that's doing it. And then he sets up there in his house.
Yeah, but it could have been on my ground too, and I or somebody else.
And it's on your shoulders too. He starts it and then he just walks away, says no comment, and he lets you guys handle it. That's the way he operates. And I don't think it's a safe process. I really don't. But hey,
I know.
Time will tell.
Picture yourself having open heart surgery or brain surgery by a surgeon just out of med school, and this is what you're going to subject yourself to and see what happens, because that's what this is all about. That's really what it is.
I understand, and it's not like we're just saying, well, we hope it all goes well, and I guess we do, but we're relying on an agency, a state agency, whether or not, I would disagree probably that they're bought by the gas and oil companies, but we are relying on a state agency. But that doesn't mean something bad won't happen, but we are relying on their expertise and their regulatory influence over the process that this will go correctly. And that's the truth of it.
But they have to have a performance bond, that company, performance.
40,000.
If it doesn't do work, then another company will come in and correct the problems.
$40,000 is, as high as they need for a bond.
It's almost, the bonding's almost a joke.
I got more, liability insurance on my farm than this oil company needs to ruin your wells, if you stop and think about it.
I appreciate the questions that Roger gave, because some of those questions, I thought about some of those already as to what's going to occur here. But some of these others, I think we need to probably discuss as a board and understand, how would we address those problems, whether it's either the fire department or emergency response and things like that. Those things are important. Those are things that we can control and have an effect upon if something does occur. So what is in our box, we will work to make sure that we have a control of. There's things outside of our control, and I guess we're not going to try to cross either and try to influence something that we really haven't. We're not going to pursue this.
Zoning and building would be another way to do this too. Just making sure that with any kind of building permit they get, if it's whatever it is, hold them to a real strict standard, and just let them know that they're being watched every moment.
Hopefully we hold it to the same standard we would for anybody requesting a building permit. Not more, not less. That's we should treat everybody equally, right?
Well, it's kind of like this. You should treat everybody equally. You also have to take a look at it from the standpoint of, the people in your township that are responsible. So you know what they're going to do. They're going to do the right thing. But if all of a sudden, let's say you have somebody that works for the township and he has a drinking problem, you're probably not going to want to get him behind the wheel of a car. And if he does get behind it after 5 o'clock at night, you're going to have to keep a much closer eye on him. So is everybody being treated the same? Yeah, pretty much, but then we know the ones we can trust, we know the ones we have to watch.
And it's a new process, something we're not dealing with all the time, so there's no doubt that it would be more highlighted.
Exactly, it's got to be watched closely.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, let's have one more public comment, and then we should move on.
Thanks a lot. Yeah,
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And I'm not going to pretend to be, persuading anybody to change their mind or position on something. But I did want to say a couple of things, kind of like what Roger was saying, to clear our own consciences. You've been presented the facts, and like what you said, it's hard to decide what's to believe because you got people arguing this, you got people arguing that, and so they kind of cancel each other out. And so it's tough. And I got to tell you, it's a different world than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we had actual news reporters who would try to scoop one another. There was competition even at the Muskegon Chronicle. We don't have any reporters now. The whole Muskegon Chronicle M Live is all owned by 2 board members or brothers on the East Coast. They own all the newspapers around here. They have so many holdings, and you can look this up, Advance Publication. That's what owns the reporters. There's so much money in politics. I mean, there's always been money in politics, but not global money. And oil money, there's never been bigger money than oil money. And that's what's influencing politicians or bureaucrats that we're trusting. It's a different world entirely. And so how do you know who to believe? Now, what we said was, where's the money? And, the oil industry buying off the politicians, can that be true? Well, absolutely, because the bureaucracies, the government has been so strapped. And the DEQ will tell you exactly what year that they switched from having the citizens pay for the service. The DEQ will protect them. It isn't us paying for them anymore. It's the oil industry that actually supports the DEQ. They have 29 now geologists on staff. And by the way, these 29 geologists would have to visit 1 well, 3 wells every day of every year. Well, every day of every month of every week, in order to visit all 18,000 wells in Michigan right now, just once per year. Anyway, we do have 29 now geologists, which is a huge step up, because we're not paying for it anymore, the oil industry is. And so there's a conflict of interest. Why would they want to do anything but more business with the oil industry when they're actually keeping the staff under them so that they have a budget, and the budget increases and the oil industry is paying them? So there's a conflict of interest right there. Who do you trust? A different world. We have to do our own research, so it's our civic responsibility to do that. As a democracy, and by the way, Occupy Muskegon supports democracy. That's what we're all about. The 99%, not the 1%, or actually 1%, who has all the money, that buys you and me. Okay, and so what do? We have a civic responsibility in a democracy to educate ourselves. As leaders in a democracy, to educate our people who trust us. And then we have the responsibility not just to go to the poll and throw a switch, but actually act on what we've learned. Now, Roger listed some questions. There's information on the internet. And I'm reading here, and I think maybe Matt have pages left with you. This is on the internet. This, what we've done is see the DEQ goes town to town to downtown, and they have the same answers to the 3x5 cards. It doesn't matter what you ask. They're going to say the same answer anyway. And so these things are put down on this thing, and then the truth is actually stated underneath it. I'm just going to really quickly go over a couple of these. I'm not going to try to hit everything. If you can remember anything, please remember the Halliburton loophole, which exempts these oil industry. Now you said you're going to keep them the same standard as you would keep everybody else. The truth is they aren't held to any standard at all. The fracking oil industry, by the Halliburton loophole, exempts them from any accountability. They can have a fire, they can have a spill, they can drill under your property. They don't have to account to anybody. The Halliburton loophole exempts them from all of that. The Great Lakes Compact that preserves our water resources here in the States and Canada, they're exempt from all of that. They can take as much as they like because it's a federal law. It was put in, Cheney was in office, called the Halliburton loophole. Anyway, gas and oil operations are exempt from the strict rules imposed by water withdrawal by statute. Supervisory order from 2011 requires a water withdrawal assessment tool, computer program be utilized, but even when the tool indicates adverse impact, meaning a certain percentage of the fish will die, the supervisor of wells can and has permitted the water withdrawal anyway. In fact, they've never restricted a permit in Michigan ever for any reason. Anyway, the supervisor can go ahead and anyway. Kalkaska, here's this stuff. They're foreign firms. They're not going to be hiring people from around here. In Kalkaska, 327,180,000 gallons of water came out of their ecosystem on top of a previous 60,500,000 gallons of water out of Kalkaska's water supply, groundwater, into the ground for fracking. That's gone forever. And that's what's planning on happening here to your water resources, if you can afford that. The truth is it's simply unprofitable for private companies to continue to harvest our public oil and gas resources unless they can use our public water resources. By granting large volumes of water withdrawals to a foreign company like Encana, which is the one that did the thing in Kalkaska, the public wealth of the many is transferred to the private wealth of the few. There is nothing to ensure that the gas and oil extracted by Encana will stay in Michigan or even in the U.S. When they are done extracting all of the deep shale gas and oil here, which they will soon, using hundreds of millions of gallons of our water and injecting hundreds of millions of gallons of toxic waste under our lands, they will be gone back to their own countries, leaving us to deal with long-term environmental damage they cause. Now, I remember the Peter, Paul, and Mary song, when will they ever learn? Why is it that everybody in every community has to learn the hard way? Please, get on the internet, see what's happening all around you. Michigan's a latecomer to this game. This hasn't just happened recently in the United States. It's tearing up communities, and this is really happening, and it really will happen here. Learn a hard way you're going to.
Thanks. Thanks for everybody's comments, and I appreciate the civility of it, I guess. And I do appreciate your concern. I do. You know, whether we agree or disagree on all points, I still appreciate you. I mean, you have concerns, and you have, you're willing to spend your time on it. It's honest. I appreciate that. Okay, we should move on then.
Say it again, Roger. What'd you say?
I got some names.
Where were they?